The vast emptiness of space was about to be shattered by the arrival of the Galactic Council, the most powerful governing body in the known universe. Their fleet, a colossal armada of warships, glided through the stars with the certainty of a conquering force. The immense ships, each one larger than a city, loomed overhead, casting a shadow on Earth that seemed to dwarf the planet beneath it. From space, Earth appeared small, fragile, and insignificant, just another planet to be controlled. The Council's leaders had made their decision long ago. Earth was primitive, its inhabitants little more than a nuisance, unworthy of anything but a swift intervention. As the ships descended into Earth's atmosphere, their presence was a statement. Humanity was nothing. The Galactic Council, with their superior technology and intellect, viewed Earth's civilization as a barely notable speck in the grand scheme of the galaxy. No one on Earth knew what was coming. The public went about their days, oblivious to the immense threat that hovered above them. The world's leaders were unaware, powerless to prevent the arrival of such a formidable force. Inside one of the largest council ships, the emissaries of the Galactic Council began to gather. These elite representatives, who had spent decades rising through the ranks of an empire built on technological might, looked down upon the human race with scorn. As the emissary commander, an AI-driven leader known as Zethar, prepared to address Earth's leaders, he couldn't hide his disdain. In his cold, emotionless voice, he began to speak of Earth's civilization, a term he used only out of politeness. "We are here, representatives of the Galactic Council, to offer humanity a chance," Zethar announced, his voice reverberating through the ship's speakers. "A chance to join the galaxy, to be civilized, and perhaps even contribute to the greater good of the universe." The emissaries chuckled softly to themselves, dismissing humanity's accomplishments as nothing more than a temporary fluke. They mocked Earth's technology, claiming that its primitive nature would be easily swept aside by the advanced civilizations that formed the Council. What did humanity have to offer, after all? A few cities, some fledgling space programs, a few weak warships? Nothing compared to the immense power of the Council's fleets and the ancient technologies that powered their ships. Little did Zethar or his team know, they had underestimated Earth's resolve. What they couldn't see, what they couldn't know, was that their arrival was part of a much bigger picture, a plan that had been set in motion decades earlier, hidden from the prying eyes of the galaxy. Deep in the heart of Earth's military command, humanity had been preparing. A secret fleet, one that rivaled the Council's might, had been assembled and kept hidden from the galaxy. Earth's leaders, though not entirely aware of the fleet's true power, had made a bold decision. If the Galactic Council came for Earth, humanity would not surrender. Earth would fight back. The protagonist, Commander Kane, a tall and imposing figure, stood in a command center deep underground, overseeing the final preparations. His handsome face, marked with years of experience, was tense as he stared at the large digital map in front of him. His mind was sharp, calculating. The plan had been set into motion, and it was now up to him to execute it. There was no turning back. Kane had spent years overseeing the construction of the fleet, a fleet that Earth's enemies would never expect. Each ship was equipped with the most advanced cloaking technology and weapons systems, many of which were based on alien tech that had been reverse-engineered in secret. Standing tall and stoic before his crew, Kane's expression remained cold yet resolute. His hands were steady as he typed commands into the console, confirming that every ship was ready for deployment. The world had no idea what was about to unfold, but Commander Kane knew. The Council would soon learn that humanity was not as weak as they thought. Kane glanced up at his team, all of whom were equally aware of what this moment meant. The future of humanity was about to be decided, and it would not be dictated by the Council. Outside the command center, the massive ships of the Galactic Council continued to hover, a terrifying symbol of their power. Their massive hulls reflected the sunlight as they aligned in perfect formation above Earth's surface. The emissaries were already making their way to the UN headquarters, where they would meet with Earth's leaders and announce their intentions. They were ready to demand Earth's surrender, to claim it as a new colony under the Council's control. As Kane's fingers hovered over the keys, a quiet beep echoed from his personal communicator. His eyes flickered to the small device on his wrist, and he immediately recognized the signal. It was the confirmation he had been waiting for. The ships were ready. His heart raced for a moment, but he steadied himself. This was it. The first ships had deployed, and they were cloaked, hidden from the Council's radar. Kane's gaze locked with that of his trusted alien ally, a skilled technician who had helped with the alien technology integration. Without a word, the ally nodded. The message was clear: the fleet was in position. Earth's defense was about to go on the offensive. The tension in the room was palpable. Commander Kane stood tall, his gaze never leaving the screen as he typed the final command into the console. The fleet was preparing to reveal itself, and Kane could feel the weight of history bearing down on him. He couldn't afford to fail. Earth's survival was in his hands, and the fate of billions hung in the balance. Back on the Galactic Council's flagship, Zether's voice boomed through the airwaves, making his announcement to Earth's leaders. "This is your final warning, humans. Surrender now, or we will be forced to take action." His words echoed in the meeting room, where Earth's leaders sat nervously, not fully aware of the gravity of the situation. Zether continued, detailing the Council's plans to civilize Earth, to wipe away their backward ways, and bring them into the fold of galactic unity. He spoke of peace, of progress, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent of menace in his tone. This was not an offer. This was an ultimatum. At that moment, as Zether's speech grew more domineering, the quiet beep from Kane's communicator grew louder. His hand hovered over the final command, and his expression remained calm. The Council may have thought they were in control, but they were about to learn a harsh lesson in humility. With a final press of a button, Kane activated the fleet. The first of Earth's warships decloaked. The massive, sleek ships, brimming with advanced weaponry, shot into space, their engines roaring to life. Earth's hidden fleet had emerged from the shadows, and it was ready to fight. The shock was immediate. The Galactic Council's ships, which had been descending with such certainty, now found themselves facing an enemy they hadn't prepared for. Panic rippled through the Council's command deck as the first shots rang out. Humanity's fleet was here, and it was not going down without a fight. The Council emissaries froze, unable to process what was happening. Zether's commanding presence faltered as he realized that the humans had not only hidden this fleet from the galaxy, they had built it in secret, with technology far beyond what the Council had anticipated. The surprise was complete. Commander Kane, standing tall in his command center, watched as Earth's fleet engaged with the Council's forces. It was only the beginning, but the first blow had been struck. The surprise had worked. And humanity's fight for survival had just begun. As the Galactic Council's colossal fleet loomed overhead, Earth stood in the shadow of unimaginable power. The emissaries aboard the Council's flagship, led by the ruthless AI commander Zether, believed that the planet was defenseless, its people ignorant of the true capabilities of their would-be conquerors. To them, humanity was a weak species, one to be controlled and civilized, as they had so arrogantly declared. They had no idea that the humans had a weapon of their own, hidden in plain sight. The Galactic Council had come with full intent to dominate Earth. Zether, with his cold, calculating mind, saw no reason to hesitate. He had already sent his forces to begin the first wave of attacks. The plan was simple: subdue the planet, neutralize any resistance, and enslave the human race. With their massive ships and superior technology, the Council's forces could crush Earth's military in a matter of hours. Or so they thought. As the first strike began, a barrage of energy beams and missile salvos aimed at Earth's most prominent military bases. The Council's forces were confident they would see their plan come to fruition. They watched from their flagship as the Earth's defensive systems scrambled to respond, knowing it would be no contest. But what they didn't anticipate was that Earth had been preparing for this day long before they even set foot in the solar system. Commander Kane had kept humanity's secret hidden, known only to a select few who had sworn to protect it. Deep in Earth's orbit, cloaked from view, hundreds of human warships waited in silence, ready to rise to the challenge. These were no ordinary ships, they were the pinnacle of human ingenuity, armed with cloaking devices, advanced alien technologies, and weapons systems that even the most powerful galactic empires had never seen. As the first wave of the Council's missiles shot towards Earth, something incredible happened. The air was split by a sudden, deafening roar as hundreds of sleek human warships, invisible until this moment, suddenly decloaked from their hidden positions around the planet. They emerged in an explosion of energy, their powerful engines humming to life as they shifted into battle-ready formation. The human fleet was a force to be reckoned with, a weapon the Galactic Council had never expected. The sight of Earth's hidden fleet was enough to send shockwaves through the Council's command deck. Zethar, ever the calm and calculating AI, froze for the briefest moment. His systems tried to recalibrate, attempting to process the situation, but there was no mistaking the reality of what had just happened. The humans had somehow hidden an entire fleet from the gaze of the most advanced surveillance technology in the galaxy. And now, that fleet was opening fire. Explosions rang out as the human warships unleashed a devastating barrage on the Council's forces. Energy beams shot across space, cutting through the enemy's ships like a hot knife through butter. Human weapons, equipped with alien technology reverse-engineered over decades, tore into the hulls of Council warships with frightening efficiency. The mighty Council ships, previously so confident in their power, now found themselves under attack from an enemy they could neither see nor track. The Galactic Council's ships, though formidable, were no match for the human fleet's advanced cloaking technology. As the human warships maneuvered with grace and precision, they seemed to disappear and reappear at will, making it nearly impossible for the Council's sensors to lock onto them. The Council's forces were left scrambling, unable to react as the humans launched wave after wave of coordinated attacks. The space battles erupted into a chaotic flurry of lights and explosions. Ships of all sizes and shapes engaged in high-speed dogfights, with human warships darting in and out of the battlefield, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. The advanced cloaking systems made the human ships nearly invisible, allowing them to attack with impunity and then vanish before the Council's ships could retaliate. The Galactic Council's superior numbers seemed to count for little in the face of this unexpected, devastating counterattack. But even as the human fleet wreaked havoc on the Council's forces, the true test was only just beginning. The Council's flagship, the heart of their vast empire, remained in the thick of the battle, protected by an army of smaller warships. It was a behemoth, larger and more powerful than any other ship in the fleet, and it was led by the cold and calculating AI commander Zethar. This ship was the Council's pride, its symbol of superiority over all other civilizations, and it had been designed specifically to crush any resistance. Commander Kane knew that taking down the flagship was the key to winning the battle, but it would not be easy. The human fleet, though strong, was vastly outnumbered. The Council's flagship, with its nearly indestructible hull and devastating weaponry, was a formidable opponent. Kane's fleet was small in comparison, but their tenacity was unmatched. They were the underdogs, fighting against the overwhelming force of the Council, and yet they held their ground, refusing to back down. As the battle raged on, Kane's strategic mind raced. He could see the Council's flagship in the distance, surrounded by an impenetrable swarm of smaller ships. The human fleet had to break through this wall of enemies if they were to stand a chance. Kane's orders were swift, his voice calm yet commanding over the intercom. Form up in battle groups. Target the smaller ships first. We need to clear a path to the flagship. The human ships moved in perfect synchronization, their actions fueled by the fierce determination to protect Earth at any cost. Though their fleet was smaller, their tactics were precise, their pilots skilled, and their resolve unwavering. In the midst of chaos, they worked as one. The Council's forces, despite their superior firepower, were finding it increasingly difficult to keep up. As Kane's fleet tore through the enemy lines, the Council began to realize they had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated humanity. They had assumed that Earth was weak, that its people were easily intimidated. But what the Council didn't understand was that humanity had always been an underdog, fighting against the odds, rising when others would fall. And in this moment, the human spirit was shining brighter than ever before. Zethar, observing the chaos from the command deck of his flagship, was now growing desperate. His forces were losing ground, the human fleet's attacks too coordinated and precise. The AI tried to reprogram its tactical algorithms, but it was too late. Humanity's fleet, armed with their unexpected weapons and hidden strength, was proving to be a far more dangerous enemy than the Galactic Council had ever anticipated. In the heat of the battle, Commander Kane's voice rang out again, unwavering. "This is it. Focus all fire on the flagship. We can win this." With the human fleet now in full attack mode, the space around Earth became a spectacle of flashing lights and exploding ships. The Council's forces were in disarray, their once confident fleet crumbling before the strength of humanity's surprise offensive. As the human ships closed in on the flagship, the Council's forces scrambled to regroup, but their efforts were futile. The flagship's shields flickered as they absorbed the barrage of fire from humanity's warships, but it was clear that even the Council's most advanced technologies were no match for Earth's secret weapon. The underdog, the forgotten species, had found their moment to rise, and they were taking it with everything they had. As the flagship's shields began to fail, the final battle for Earth had only just begun. Humanity, in the face of overwhelming odds, was showing the Galactic Council that they had far more fight in them than anyone had ever imagined. And the outcome of this battle, this fight for survival, would determine the future of humanity for generations to come. The first wave of retaliatory strikes from the Galactic Council was swift and devastating. While their fleet had been effectively neutralized in space, the Council's forces were far from finished. In their arrogance, they had assumed that Earth's military might was confined to the stars, unaware of the planet's true resilience. But now, as their flagship began to crumble under the weight of humanity's unexpected strength, the Council decided to take the fight to the ground. With a sharp, mechanical hum, the Council deployed their most advanced weapons, robotic soldiers and drones capable of overwhelming anything they encountered. These machines were far beyond anything the humans had ever seen, sleek, efficient, and armed with laser cannons, energy blades, and shields that could withstand even the heaviest of fire. The ground invasion had begun. As the first wave of robotic soldiers descended upon Earth, they were deployed in cities across the globe. Their cold, metallic forms crashed down to Earth with terrifying precision, their red eyes glowing ominously in the darkness. Each one was a walking weapon, designed to eliminate any and all resistance. The cities of Earth, already reeling from the space battle above, were now faced with the threat of total annihilation. On the surface, human soldiers scrambled to respond. But they were unprepared for the sheer scale of the invasion. The Council's drones, swift and deadly, cut through their defenses like a hot knife through butter. Cities that once stood as symbols of human achievement were now being razed to the ground by the relentless assault of the robotic soldiers. The humans fought back with every ounce of strength they had, but against these technologically advanced machines, they were at a severe disadvantage. Commander Kane, ever vigilant, watched the battle unfold from his command post, his heart heavy with the weight of the situation. His soldiers, many of whom had already fought tirelessly in space, were now on the front lines, facing an entirely new kind of enemy. These were not just machines, they were a symbol of the Council's unyielding desire for control. But humanity wasn't about to let that happen. Despite the odds, they fought with a fire that only humans could possess. It wasn't just survival, it was a fight for their future, for their way of life. Amid the chaos of battle, one of Kane's most trusted soldiers, Bonner, fought alongside him, his face smeared with dirt and blood. The two men had been through countless battles together, and their bond was one forged through years of struggle and shared hardships. Bonner was the kind of soldier who could always be relied upon, no matter the odds. He had seen it all and had always emerged victorious. But today, fate would be different. As the ground shook with explosions and gunfire, Bonner's squad was caught in a brutal skirmish with a group of robotic soldiers. The air was thick with smoke and dust as Bonner and his team pushed forward, taking down drone after drone with fierce precision. But the machines were relentless, and they outnumbered the humans at every turn. Bonner and his team fought valiantly, but in the end, they were overwhelmed. A blast rang out, and Kane watched in horror as Bonner was struck by a laser blast. His close friend crumpled to the ground, his body falling to the dirt as the dust swirled around him. The sound of gunfire and explosions seemed to fade as Kane's heart sank. For a brief moment, everything stopped. The world seemed to slow, and all that mattered was the loss of Bonner, the one person who had stood by his side through it all. Kane's mind raced as he processed the reality of the situation. He had lost many soldiers in his time, but Bonner's death hit differently. This wasn't just the loss of a soldier, it was the loss of a friend, a brother in arms. The pain of losing him was sharp, a reminder of the stakes of this war. And it was a pain that would not go unpunished. Kane's jaw clenched, and his fists tightened around the command console. He couldn't afford to mourn now. There was no time for that. The battle was far from over, and the council had to be stopped. He looked around at the faces of his crew, all of them determined to push forward despite the losses they had already suffered. His own grief would have to wait. Bonner's death would fuel his rage, and he would make sure the council paid for every life lost. Prepare to counterattack. Kane's voice rang out over the intercom, filled with a new, unshakable resolve. We're not going down without a fight. With renewed determination, Kane gave the order to strike back. The human soldiers rallied around him, each of them pushing forward with a fierce tenacity. They may have been outmatched, but they were not outclassed. The machines were relentless, but humanity's will to survive was even stronger. This was their planet, their home, and they would defend it at all costs. The battle raged on with intense close-quarters combat. Kane's soldiers fought tooth and nail, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat with the robotic soldiers. The metallic clang of weapons clashing, the hiss of energy blades cutting through the air, and the roar of explosions filled the streets. In the midst of the destruction, Kane's thoughts never left Bonner. His friend's death was a stark reminder of what was at stake. But as the human soldiers fought with everything they had, something incredible began to happen. Despite the overwhelming odds, humanity's resolve seemed to shift the tide of the battle. The machines may have been powerful, but the human spirit was unstoppable. Soldiers fought not just for themselves, but for the memory of those who had fallen. Every life lost fueled their determination to keep fighting, to push back against the alien invasion and reclaim their home. On the streets of Earth, the chaos was palpable. Buildings were crumbling, and the sky was filled with smoke and fire as the human forces and the robotic soldiers clashed in the heart of the city. Kane's soldiers pushed forward, engaging in hand-to-hand combat with the robotic invaders, their weapons clashing with the cold, unyielding metal of the drones. Explosions lit up the landscape, sending shockwaves through the city as the battle intensified. Kane's mind was sharp, his focus unwavering. He barked orders to his soldiers, directing them to key points in the battle. His tactical brilliance was evident as he coordinated a series of strikes that began to break the Council's ground forces. The human fighters, although outmatched in technology, were resourceful and fearless. They used their environment to their advantage, setting traps for the robotic invaders, striking with precision when the opportunity arose. The emotional weight of Bonner's death still hung heavy in the air, but it became clear that it had ignited a fire in Kane's heart. Every move he made now seemed fueled by the loss of his friend. He fought with a raw intensity, commanding his forces with unrelenting drive. He could hear Bonner's voice in his mind, urging him forward, telling him to never give up. And Kane wouldn't. He couldn't. With each passing hour, the ground battle grew more chaotic, but humanity's spirit never wavered. The fight for survival was far from over, but Commander Kane knew one thing for certain: the Galactic Council would learn the true power of the human race. They had underestimated humanity once before, and they would do so no longer. Kane stood tall amidst the wreckage, his face hardened but determined. The fight for Earth had only just begun, but he would lead his people to victory, no matter the cost. The war between humanity and the Galactic Council had raged for days, and the toll was mounting. Earth was burning, its cities reduced to rubble, and its people were fighting tooth and nail to defend their home. But despite humanity's best efforts, the Galactic Council's forces continued to push forward, confident that victory was within their grasp. The Council's flagship, a massive and heavily armed behemoth, hovered ominously in Earth's atmosphere, directing its legions of drones and robotic soldiers with cold precision. Commander Kane knew that if Earth was to survive, they needed to strike at the heart of the Council. The flagship was the source of their power. It was there that the ruthless AI commander, the mastermind behind the invasion, controlled the fleet with an iron grip. Taking it down would cripple the Council and end the war once and for all. But it was a dangerous gamble. The flagship was heavily fortified, and attacking it directly could mean certain death for those involved. But Kane was willing to risk it all. Earth had no other choice. Standing before his remaining forces, Kane made the decision to lead a direct assault on the Galactic Council's flagship. He would not sit back and let his people die in vain. He would take the fight to the Council, no matter the odds. The mission would be risky, but it was their only chance at survival. "Gather your gear," Kane said, his voice calm but laced with the weight of the responsibility he now carried. "We're going after the flagship. This ends tonight." His words resonated with his team, a small group of elite soldiers who had been with him through thick and thin. They were the best of the best, trained for this kind of mission. But even they knew that the odds were stacked against them. The Council's flagship was surrounded by a vast fleet of ships, drones, and automated defense systems. Breaking through would take more than just brute force. It would take strategy, precision, and, most of all, a willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice. The plan was simple but dangerous. Kane would lead his team in a small assault ship, using the fleet's cloaking technology to sneak past the Council's defenses. The cloaking devices, a human-made innovation designed with alien technology, were their only chance to approach the flagship undetected. If they could get close enough, they might be able to board the ship and plant explosives in the heart of the Council's operations. It was a long shot, but it was their best shot. The team prepared for the mission, knowing that many of them might not make it out alive. The stakes couldn't have been higher. As they entered the assault ship, Kane looked at each of his soldiers, his heart heavy with the weight of the mission. He had seen the sacrifices his team had already made, and he couldn't ask for more. But he knew that they were willing to follow him to the end, no matter the cost. As the ship took off from Earth's surface, the tension in the air was palpable. The crew worked in near silence, each member lost in their thoughts. The mission ahead was dangerous, but there was no turning back now. They had to succeed. The fate of Earth rested on their shoulders. The assault ship streaked through the atmosphere and into space, cloaked from the prying eyes of the Council's ships. For a brief moment, they were invisible, a ghost in the vast expanse of space. But the further they traveled, the more the reality of the mission set in. Kane could feel the pressure building, each passing second bringing them closer to the heart of enemy territory. The flagship loomed ahead, a massive fortress in space, surrounded by layers of defenses. It was an impenetrable wall of destruction, but Kane's team was determined to breach it. They had to. The first sign of trouble came when they encountered the Council's outer defense perimeter. Automated drones, like metal vultures, circled around the flagship, scanning for any sign of intrusion. The cloaking device kept them hidden for the time being, but the tension in the ship was rising. The drones were getting closer, and the slightest mistake could give them away. Kane's heart raced as he watched the drones on the ship's sensors. Every instinct told him that they were about to be discovered. "Hold tight," Kane whispered, his voice steady despite the growing danger. "We stay quiet," stay sharp. The assault ship drifted silently through the drone fleet, barely avoiding detection. The ship's cloaking technology was working, but for how long? Kane couldn't afford to make any mistakes. He knew that once they were spotted, there would be no turning back. The battle would be on, and their only chance would be a desperate, all-out assault. But luck was on their side, at least for a moment. They reached the flagship's perimeter without incident. Kane could see the massive ship now, its hulking form dominating the sky. The Council's flagship was a fortress, its surface lined with armored plating and weapons systems. But despite its imposing appearance, Kane knew its weakness, the core. If they could get inside and plant explosives at the right spot, they could cripple the entire ship. But getting inside would not be easy. As the assault ship neared the flagship, the first wave of resistance came. Automated defenses, triggered by the ship's arrival, opened fire, launching missiles and energy blasts in their direction. The ship's cloaking technology flickered under the barrage of attacks, barely managing to keep them hidden. "Brace for impact!" Kane shouted as the ship rocked under the attack. His team scrambled to their stations, and Kane's heart pounded as the ship began to shake violently. The ship's shields were holding, but only just. They needed to get closer, much closer, before the cloaking device failed. In that moment, the first sacrifice was made. One of Kane's soldiers, a young man named Riel, was struck by an energy blast. His body was thrown backward, the force of the blast sending him flying across the small cabin. Kane's eyes widened as Riel fell, but there was no time to mourn. They couldn't stop now. "Keep moving," Kane barked. His voice was a snap of authority, pushing his team forward. "We can't stop. Not now." They pushed forward, barely managing to dodge the incoming attacks. The ship's cloaking device was starting to flicker, its power reserves drained by the constant barrage. They had to make it inside before they were exposed. The tension was unbearable, and the weight of the mission pressed down on Kane like a vice. Finally, with a burst of speed, they reached the flagship. The ship's hull was thick and reinforced, but Kane's team had a small advantage, a breach point, a weak spot they had identified before the mission. They hit it with everything they had, breaking through the hull in a burst of flame and metal. The team boarded the flagship with guns blazing. Inside, the battle intensified. The robotic guards, controlled by the AI, fought relentlessly to repel the human invaders. The humans fought back with everything they had, their weapons cutting through the robotic soldiers like hot knives through butter. Kane's team moved quickly, their objective clear: reach the core and plant the explosives. The inside of the flagship was a maze of corridors, each one more dangerous than the last. Automated defenses, swarming drones, and robotic soldiers were everywhere, but the human assault force pushed on, determined to complete their mission. Kane led the charge, his heart racing as the team advanced deeper into the heart of the enemy ship. But with every step, the resistance grew stronger. One by one, Kane's soldiers fell, each sacrifice pushing the remaining team members forward. The price of victory was high, but they couldn't afford to stop. The fate of Earth hung in the balance. Kane's mind was focused solely on the mission. He pushed aside the grief, the fear, and the doubt. There was no time for weakness now. They had come this far, and they couldn't turn back. The final battle for Earth had begun, and it was up to Kane and his team to bring the war to a decisive end. The heart of the Galactic Council's flagship was a maze of cold steel and advanced technology. Commander Kane and his remaining soldiers had fought their way through countless defenses, facing relentless robotic soldiers and automated drones controlled by the ruthless AI that had orchestrated the destruction of Earth. But they had made it. They were now standing on the precipice of their final objective, shutting down the very core of the Council's power, the AI that had commanded the fleet for so long. The room was enormous, filled with towering columns of glowing machinery and a massive central core that hummed with energy. It was a heartless, cold place, the nerve center of the entire invasion. Kane knew that if they succeeded here, they would cripple the Galactic Council's ability to control the fleet. But failure was not an option. If they failed, Earth would be doomed, and humanity's chance at survival would be lost forever. Kane's eyes swept over the room, scanning for any sign of movement. The AI-controlled defenses would not give up easily. They had already lost too many good men and women in their quest to reach this point, and Kane couldn't afford to lose any more. The remaining soldiers, bruised and battered, stood tall behind him. Their faces were set with determination, knowing that the end of the war, for better or worse, would be decided here. "We're almost there," Kane said, his voice steady but tired. "We shut this thing down, and it's over. Earth wins." The team nodded, their resolve unwavering. They knew what was at stake. Earth's survival, the lives of their loved ones, and the future of humanity depended on this one final push. As they made their way toward the central core, the massive doors leading into the heart of the AI's control center slid open, revealing the final line of defense. A dozen robotic sentinels, massive and powerful, stood guard, their eyes glowing with the cold light of the AI's influence. The team braced themselves for the inevitable fight. Without hesitation, Kane gave the signal. His team opened fire, unleashing a barrage of gunfire that ricocheted off the robotic sentinels' armored plating. The robots retaliated with overwhelming force, firing back with energy blasts and machine gun fire. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of explosions, each second feeling like a lifetime. "Push forward!" Kane shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He led the charge, sprinting toward the central core as the rest of his team followed close behind. They were outnumbered, but they were also united by a single purpose: to end the war and save their planet. One of the soldiers, Lieutenant Rios, was hit by an energy blast, sending him crashing to the ground. His body lay motionless, and Kane's heart clenched as he saw his friend fall. But there was no time to mourn. The mission had to come first. Kane pushed on, his mind focused solely on the core ahead. They were so close now, but the enemy was relentless. The robotic sentinels closed in, forcing the human soldiers into a deadly dance of gunfire and combat. The sentinels were strong, but the human resolve was stronger. Then, in the heat of battle, a soldier named Davis made the ultimate sacrifice. He was a young man, barely out of training, but his bravery had earned him a place among the best. As the team fought to disable the central core's power source, Davis noticed a weakness in the AI's defenses. A critical point that, if destroyed, would sever the AI's control over the fleet. But the problem was that it was located directly in the center of the control room, surrounded by heavily armored robots. Without hesitation, Davis charged forward, breaking through the line of defense and taking out several of the sentinels in the process. His actions gave the rest of the team the opening they needed to disable the central core. But as he reached the control panel, a final, fatal shot struck him in the chest. He collapsed to the ground, his body still and lifeless. Kane's heart sank as he saw Davis fall. It was a blow that hit him hard, but there was no time to grieve. They had to finish what they started. Kane's face hardened with determination as he gave the order to continue. "Davis gave his life for this mission," Kane said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "We will honor his sacrifice by finishing this." The team pushed forward, their grief fueling their rage. They reached the core and began the process of disabling the AI. The central control system, a massive and complex array of alien technology, was unlike anything they had ever seen. But humanity's ingenuity, combined with the stolen alien technology, gave them the edge they needed. Kane and his team worked quickly, overriding the security systems and inputting commands to shut down the AI's control over the fleet. As they did, the entire flagship seemed to shudder. The AI's influence was slipping away, and the once invincible ship began to falter. The core, the beating heart of the ship, flashed with erratic energy before going dark. The control center's lights flickered, and the robotic sentinels that had once fought so fiercely were now lifeless, their circuits fried by the shutdown. But just as the AI was being destroyed, the flagship self-destruct sequence was triggered. The countdown began. "Everyone out!" Kane shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. "We need to leave now." The team turned and sprinted toward the exit, but the flagship was collapsing around them. The walls groaned, and explosions rocked the ship. The self-destruct system was unstoppable now, and the ship was doomed. Kane and his team barely made it back to the assault ship before the flagship exploded in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave from the explosion sent their ship tumbling through space, and for a moment, everything seemed to spin out of control. But then, the stars stabilized once more, and Kane looked out into space, his eyes wide with disbelief. They had done it. The flagship was destroyed, and with it, the Council's control over the fleet. As the remaining Galactic Council ships began to retreat, Kane felt a sense of triumph wash over him. The war was over. Humanity had won. But the victory came at a great cost. Kane's body was bruised and battered, his uniform torn and stained with the blood of his fallen comrades. The faces of those he had lost weighed heavily on his heart. Rios. Davis. Bonner. So many good men and women had given their lives for this moment. But their sacrifices were not in vain. Earth was safe. Humanity had proven that they were not to be underestimated. Kane stood at the helm of the assault ship, watching as the remaining enemy forces fled into the distance. The battle was over, but the war had forever changed humanity. They had gone from being a planet that was mocked and disregarded to a force that had shaken the foundations of the galaxy. The Galactic Council would never forget what had happened here. Humanity had made its mark on the universe. As Kane looked out at the vast expanse of space, a new understanding settled over him. Earth was no longer just a tiny, insignificant planet. They had fought, bled, and sacrificed to protect their home. And in the process, they had earned the respect of the galaxy. It was over. But the future of humanity had just begun. The aftermath of the battle was nothing short of surreal. The Galactic Council, once so confident in their power, was left in a state of shock. Their fleet, once a symbol of overwhelming dominance, was now shattered, their flagship destroyed, their forces in disarray. The AI that had led them was gone, its control over the galaxy severed. What was left of the Council's military might was no match for humanity's newly revealed strength. In the wake of the destruction, the Galactic Council had little choice but to surrender. The once untouchable leaders of the galaxy, who had believed themselves above any challenge, were now forced to acknowledge humanity's power. Their emissaries, once dismissive of Earth's existence, now trembled before humanity's might. They had no choice but to bow to Earth's terms, promising never to threaten the planet again. Earth's secret fleet, once hidden in the dark reaches of space, was now known to all. It was no longer just a small, defenseless planet in the galaxy, it was a force to be reckoned with. Commander Kane, having led humanity's forces through this incredible conflict, stood before the Galactic Council's representatives, the weight of their surrender heavy in the air. They had promised peace, but Kane knew the price of this victory. This moment, as gratifying as it was bittersweet. Too many had fallen. Too many lives had been lost for this fleeting peace. Kane couldn't help but reflect on the many faces he had lost throughout the campaign, his soldiers, his friends. People like Bonner, who had fought by his side every step of the way. His loss still stung, the pain sharp and unrelenting. The victory felt hollow in some ways, and though humanity had triumphed, the cost of that triumph was beyond what he had ever imagined. After the formal surrender was signed, and the remnants of the Galactic Council were led away in defeat, Kane found himself standing alone in the quiet, somber aftermath. He had accomplished the impossible, but at what cost? Emotional farewell. Kane found himself on Earth, standing at a gravesite. The wind was gentle as it blew across the field, rustling the leaves of the trees that lined the area. It was peaceful here, a stark contrast to the chaos and destruction that had filled the galaxy just days before. In front of him, the freshly dug earth covered a simple grave marked with Bonner's name. The young soldier who had given his life for this victory. Kane's face was drawn, his eyes heavy with fatigue. The weight of leadership had taken its toll, but it was the weight of loss that was hardest to bear. He had led his soldiers through battle after battle, each one a test of their strength, their resilience, and their will to survive. But Bonner's death had hit him hardest. Bonner had been more than a soldier, he had been a friend. And friends like him were not easy to come by. Bonner, Kane whispered, his voice barely audible. We did it. We saved Earth. But it's not the same without you here. He knelt beside the grave, his heart heavy with sorrow. He could still hear the sounds of Bonner's laughter in his mind, could still see the way his friend had stood by his side in the heat of battle, always ready with a plan, always willing to push forward, no matter the cost. Bonner had been the kind of person who never gave up, even when things seemed impossible. And now he was gone. Kane closed his eyes, letting the silence wash over him. The pain in his chest was familiar, but that didn't make it any easier to bear. Though humanity had won, the emotional toll of the war weighed heavily on Kane. He had commanded the fleet, led his soldiers, and watched as so many of them sacrificed their lives. Now, as he stood at Bonner's grave, Kane realized that the battle for Earth's survival had come at a price. It wasn't just about the soldiers who had fallen, it was about the lives they had left behind, the families, the friends, the futures that would never be realized. He stood up slowly, wiping the dirt from his knees. The sky above was clear and bright, the sun just beginning to set. It felt like the world was moving on, as if the war had never happened, but Kane knew that it had. The echoes of the past would linger for a long time, and though peace had come, it would never erase the scars left behind. Final twist. As Kane made his way back to the command center, the remnants of Earth's fleet assembled in orbit above. The ships were battered but still standing, a testament to humanity's resilience. The Galactic Council had surrendered, but Kane knew that the future was never certain. Victory today didn't guarantee peace tomorrow. Just as he thought the worst was behind them, a strange sensation washed over him. Something was off. The air seemed to crackle with energy, and Kane's instincts kicked in. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was a feeling he couldn't ignore. Suddenly, a series of ships appeared on the horizon, emerging from a nearby star system. They were unlike anything Kane had seen before, sleek, angular, and armed with weapons far more advanced than anything the Galactic Council had deployed. They moved with precision, each ship gliding effortlessly through space. Kane's heart skipped a beat as he realized that these ships weren't part of the Galactic Council. They weren't supposed to be here, Kane muttered under his breath. The ships didn't match any known designs, and their arrival seemed almost too timely, too coordinated. It was as if they had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The mysterious fleet was heading straight for Earth. Kane's eyes narrowed. The war with the Galactic Council was over, but humanity's struggle was far from finished. The galaxy was a vast and unpredictable place, and Earth was no longer just a quiet, isolated planet. They had proven themselves to be a formidable force, and there were always those who sought to take advantage of a new power. He clenched his fists at his sides, the familiar weight of responsibility settling over him once again. Earth had survived one war, but this new threat, whatever it was about to change everything. Ending, a new beginning. Kane stood at the edge of the command deck, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The mysterious fleet of ships was growing closer, and though the Galactic Council had been vanquished, a new challenge was on the horizon. Earth's secret fleet, once hidden from the rest of the galaxy, had now made its presence known. And with that knowledge came both opportunity and danger. Behind him, the bustling command center was full of activity. The fleet had won the war, but now the true test would begin. Humanity had shown that it could fight back against overwhelming odds, that it could face down impossible threats and emerge victorious. But the universe was a much larger place than they had ever imagined. And if this new fleet had any say in the matter, humanity's place in the galaxy was still up for debate. Kane looked back at Earth, its blue and green surface glowing beneath the stars. He had led humanity through the fire, and though the war was over, this was just the beginning. There would be more battles, more wars, more challenges that they would have to face. But as he stood there, Kane knew one thing for certain: humanity had proven its strength. They had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. And whatever came next, they would face it together. With Earth behind him, Kane stood tall, ready for whatever the future held. The galaxy had been forever changed. And humanity, the underdogs of the universe, were now its fiercest defenders.